Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Dan with OneUp Insights, and today is the first video in a multi-part tutorial series surrounding Power BI. Now, whether you've never used the software before or have touched it a little bit, we're going to try and take you from zero to hero and cover everything that you need to know. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can get notified when the second episode in the series comes out. Let's go ahead and dive right into our first section around loading data and getting it cleaned up. All right, so first things first, we've got to load our data in before we can get it cleaned up. And to do that, we're going to hit the Get Data button here at the top left of the screen. And for this video, we're going to use the text and CSV option, but you can see just how many different options there are for loading data. Chances are, if you're in a larger organization, you've probably got some SQL databases and things like that you can connect to. But oftentimes when you're just learning, the text CSV option is going to be right. Now, we've got these 5 files here that you can download through the link in the description at my website, and we're going to go through and load these one at a time. I've already loaded these through here on the right, but you'll be presented with these options whether to load or transform the data. We're just going to hit load for now, and then as you load the last file, you are going to hit transform data, so we can go into Power Query, which is really the big workhorse data cleansing tool underneath Power BI and Excel, and we're going to clean these files up. So now I've loaded my last CSV file, the teacher's CSV. Now, Power Query is the tool we use for data cleansing and preparation so we can get ready for analysis. Now, keeping in mind that data, even at large corporations, is going to be really, really messy and a mess. A dumpster fire would be an accurate adjective oftentimes for any company's data. And that's where you come in. You need to come in and be able to prepare it and clean it and get it ready for analysis so your leadership team can get the accurate insights they need. So when we start looking around at Power Query, probably the 2 key parts are here on the far left and your far right of the screen. So on the queries, this is all of your data sources. These are the 5 tabs we have brought in from those CSV files, and we can click through those and see what that data looks like. On the right side is our applied steps. This is essentially your order of operations and what has been done to that data. And you can oftentimes build on one step to the next, and we'll get a little bit into that later. Now you'll notice there's already 3 steps here. There's a change type and promoted headers, and we can click through these steps and see what has been done at each step of the way. And Power BI uses its built-in intelligence to do this, but oftentimes, depending on your data source, you may need to do this yourself. So we're probably going to end up deleting these steps and walk through that now. So first, we're going to delete this change type and promoted headers, just so we can see what it looked like working with an absolute raw file. So we'll notice that we're now just presented with column names of just column 1 through 7, and they're all text. And the text is denoted by the ABC. And you can also see what type of text or what type of data a column is by going to the Transform tab on the top. You can click on it, and then you can see what it is currently and what you can potentially change it to. But we're not quite ready to do that yet. So if we go back to our Home tab, we need to get our first row as headers. And once again, there's a very obvious button named Use First Row as Headers. And we're going to hit that drop down and hit Use First Row as Headers. And you'll notice that in addition to us now having column names, the data types have been changed. And once again, we're going to delete this step just for instructional purposes so we can see how we need to potentially change things if Power BI is not detecting it in such an obvious manner. So first off, there are 3 key fields that I see would need to be changed right away just to be the correct data type. The first one is hire date. This is still a text field, but we would want this to be a date so we can do add some additional columns on this later. So we can go to Transform and then Data Type that is currently text and select Date. And you notice it's kind of changed into an italicized type data and shifted over to the right, and you see a little calendar in the symbol here. That's how we know it's worked. Same thing for salary. This is a text field, not a number, because we have this $sign in it. And Power BI just inherently knows that that $sign probably shouldn't be there. So if we change this to a whole number, in this case, you'll notice that automatically cleans out all of those $signs. Same thing with potentially dirty date fields in our DOB, that's date of birth in case you're not aware. We see some may be in the day, month, year format, some are in the year, month, day. But once again, Power BI has some pretty good built-in intelligence where if we go to transform and then data type and then date, it actually cleans these up quite nicely and all in the same format and cleans up the characters as well, changing them from hyphens to slashes and putting it in the traditional American style format of of month, day, year. So now that we've got our initial little first round of cleaning done where we've got our promoted headers and our proper data typing, we can move on to adding some additional columns to this to add some additional insights and make things a little bit neater. And the first thing we're going to look at is the names. Now, the first name and last name constantly having to drop in two fields, it's going to be a little annoying and appear a little disjointed in a lot of visuals. So it's probably best to combine these. And we can do that in a few different ways, which I'll walk through now. There's a couple pros and cons to each of them. So probably the easiest way to do this right off the bat is to select the first name and then hold your control key and select last name. So both columns are highlighted. And under this add columns tab at the top, there is a merge columns button, and we just select that. And we need to choose a separator. And this could be either some type of punctuation sign or a space or a tab or even something custom. But in this instance, we're going to choose space and we're going to name the new column full name. And then we're just going to say FL for first last. That's indicating the order it's in. And now you'll see a new applied step has appeared here on the right, and the full names are now combined into one column. But some places may want last name, first name, or last name, comma, first name. Now, how do we do that? You probably didn't see an option to do that. We can do that because merging columns is dependent on the order the columns are in. So we can drag and drop last name over to first name, and then repeat that exact same step we just did by control clicking both columns, hitting merge columns, and we can now choose a comma as a separator and call this full name LF for last first, just so we can see the difference. So now when we look at this full name LF, we notice there's just one little thing we'd really like to change about that, and that there's no space between the comma and the first name. So it's just Dalton, comma, Shannon, no space. So to resolve that, we actually need to do a custom column. And this is using the custom column button here in the left side of the screen under the add column ribbon. When we push this, we first need to name the column, and we'll call this full name L, comma, space F. And we're going to use the text from function, and this returns the text value of a given field. And so technically you could like concatenate or combine together numerical fields like this as well, not just text. So to do this, we're going to do text, and we'll see oftentimes all the possible functions will appear. And we're going to hit from, and then an open parentheses, and we can just select last name from this, and we're going to close our parentheses. Hit our ampersand sign, and then in a double quote, we're going to hit a comma and then a space, and then it'll give us that space after the comma we're looking for, and then another and sign, another text from function. And let's accidentally delete this little bit, and then we'll say open parentheses and then first name, close that, and we'll see no syntax errors have been detected, and we can hit OK. And now we see that it's given us exactly what we've asked for. We've got that nice, clean, kind of more standardized look of how names are presented. All right, now that our name is in a pretty happy place to standard, we can delete our other two full name fields by left clicking and then control clicking and hitting remove columns. Now, next up, we're going to want to modify our hire date. We're actually going to want to turn this into how long is this, essentially a years in service type calculation. So we can just see how long they've worked here. This will be useful later on when we're trying to evaluate teacher performance or how their students are doing in relation to how long they've worked. So we can left click on the hire date column and then go to still under the add column ribbon and hit date. and hit age. And this will give us a calculation in days as to how long they worked here. And then age will already be selected for you. And then back up on the top ribbon here on the right, you'll see duration. And we can say total years. And then you'll see that adds one more column that has converted this days into years, just divided by 365. But we'll notice it's in a decimal format because that's not how we provide our ages. We need one more quick transformation. That's by going over to the rounding function here, still under the Add Column tab, clicking on it and selecting Round Down. So we just double click on it to rename. We'll call this Time in Service. And we can delete the total years and age columns now because we don't need those anymore. And because of the applied steps, by the time they get to this step, this has already been calculated. So we're removing these columns after we no longer need them, and it's not going to affect our time and service calculation. So we'll go ahead and drag that column over, and we can see, okay, today it's November 2025. So they haven't quite come up. They're about a month short of their hire date to having 15-year anniversary. So we can see they have 14 total years in service. All right. The next thing we want to do is we'll see there's a little bit of dirty data here in the gender. We'll see sometimes it's listed as male, sometimes it's listed as M, sometimes F, sometimes female. Super easy fix, depending on how much dirtiness and disparity you have in your data. But for something like gender, pretty straightforward to do. So what we can do is go to the home ribbon and we can click on one of these values, and we'd really rather just have M and F here for simplicity's sake. So we can click on male and hit replace values here on the right side. And we can just say value defined as male, and we can replace this with M. And we'll see that that has now changed all of the males to M. And we did the exact same thing with female, changing female to a capital F, hitting OK. All right, that's cleaned up now. And the last thing we'll do is date of birth. We'll do the exact same process we did to the hire date just to calculate how old they are. So we'll go back to the add column. We'll select date, select age, and then we'll go duration, total years, and then we're going to round this down. And we'll call this, after double clicking, teacher age. And then we can delete these two columns. So now we've got a clean teachers table that we can use for our next steps here. So the last couple things we're going to talk about and to wrap up episode 1 here are going to be merge query and append query. And this involves with how you can combine data from two different sources to be in the same query here on the left. Now, let's say in this example, for appending queries, we got a second batch of teachers hired, and there are now 2 different teachers files. Now, in the files I gave you to download, there isn't a second teachers file, but we can really easily just duplicate the teachers one by right-clicking on teachers on the left, hitting duplicate, and now we have a teachers 2. And let's just say this is the second batch of teachers, and we want to combine teachers and teachers 2, so we have one clean file to work off of and aren't having to reference 2 separate things. Now, I'm going to show you why it's important to have things that are named the same thing, and I'm just going to delete this underscore from hire date, and you'll see why I do this in a second. So when we go back to teachers, and up here in the top right under home, we can hit append queries. And append queries is new. And what this is doing is it's going to stack these 2 on top of each other where all the fields match. And so we need to first then select the first table, which is teachers. That's selected by default. And then we're going to select teachers 2 and hit OK. And now what you're going to notice is where the fields where all of the names matched, everything is through, is populated. But in the hire date, we'll notice we took out the underscore in the other one, and we'll notice there's a bunch of null values on this side and a bunch of null values on this side. And if we were to go back and change the renamed columns function and just remove that applied step, if we come back, now it's fixed because the append is going to pick up any updates you make to these other tables. And now that's fixed. That just highlights the importance of making sure your data is clean and things are named similarly across the board. Now, all of these are duplicates as well. When you notice there's teacher ID 1 through 18, 1 through 18. In a real world scenario, you would have, IDs 19 through 38 here. And let's just say it did end up having some duplicates in a cleaner data scenario. To get rid of those, we can just go to the remove rows under the home here. And we've got a few different options and we can select remove duplicates. And we're essentially back where we started with the original teachers query on the left. And we can go ahead and delete append 1 and teachers 2 on the left. We're not going to use these anymore. This was just for example purposes. All right, and to finally round out this video, we're going to be talking about merging queries. Now this is going to be the first thing where we really talk about joining data together. And this is more of a database term, but we'll make sure you understand it here at the end, at least for the basics of this example. Now we have the teachers query. We've already cleaned this up. This is ready to go. Now, if we wanted to go to the classes tab, and we come over here and we realize we need to do some just very quick cleaning. We're just going to click use first row as headers. And really that's all we need to do to this. But we'll see for each classroom, there is a class ID and then there's a teacher ID. And we'll notice there's T1 through T18, just like in our teachers file. And this also tells you what grade they are and section and room number and all this kind of stuff. But wouldn't it be nice if rather than having to go and reference which teacher ID is one and look back and forth, what if we could combine the two and bring them together and match the joining rows? And that's what merging queries is for. So if we click same thing in the home ribbon, merge queries at the top right, and we're going to do this as new. And we are going to combine classes with teachers. And you notice we can't just click OK here. We need to tell Power BI what is the key field that matches between the two so it knows how to combine the rows. And because I just mentioned teacher ID, we're going to click on the matching keys between the two tables, and now we'll notice OK appears. And so for this join kind, we are going to choose left outer. We're not going to get super deep into all the different join kinds for now, but left outer and inner join are probably going to be the two you use the most of. The other two are especially anti-joins and right and full outer. They're going to have some much more specific use cases. And so what this is going to do, a join, is you'll see it says we're going to take all of the rows from the first table, which is the classes. We don't want to remove any rows from this, but we want to bring in additional columns from teachers where the teacher ID matches. And so when I click OK, it creates this new query on the right called merge one. And we'll just rename this to classes and teachers combined. And you'll say, hey, all I see is this thing that says table. What do I do with this? This doesn't actually tell me anything. And so if we click this button, the two arrows that are pointing opposite from each other, we can select which columns within the table to bring in. And so I'm going to uncheck the select all columns. And I really just need some key things. So I'm going to bring in the name of the teacher. I'm going to bring in their age, the salary, the gender, the time and service, and their hire date. And we don't need to bring in teacher ID. That would be redundant, but these are kind of the key fields we need here. And when I click OK, now we'll see we have a teachers.hire date, teachers.time and service, and so on. All of the fields from our teachers table where the teacher ID matched up. And we can go through and rename these and just call them hire date, time and service, gender, salary, and we can just call this name. And finally, the last one, we'll call it teacher H. And so now we've successfully combined our classes and our teachers. And in one spot now, we have all of the information we would want to know about a classroom, what grade they're in, and then details along the teacher as well. Now in Power BI, it can get a little bit more complex for how joins work. And sometimes if you're working with databases, you may want to do those higher upstream where you're writing queries for that if there's more complicated joins, because you are limited to just joining on one individual field for now. All right, that's a wrap on episode 1. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in episode 2.